He's a tough street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years' experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Alabama's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right. You're listening to the Legal Lowdown with your Alabama lawyer on WERC 105.5. WBHP up in Huntsville and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. Welcome to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. We have some guests scheduled in June. We anticipate having Wes Allen, who is running for the lieutenant governor on the Republican side of the ticket in the primary runoff. He is scheduled to be here Saturday, June the 13th. And then the following week, we are going to have the mayor of Hoover, Mayor Durzis. There was a report in a paper this last week. Hoover has been named in the top 10 of cities to live in the United States for its amenities and everything that Hoover has to offer its citizens. So the Hoover mayor is going to come in and discuss what all the great things of the suburbs of Birmingham have and what makes Birmingham such a great place to live. We also anticipate having a number of guests over the next couple of weeks before the runoff here in June, where the turnout will even be lower than the May election date. Because this time of year, everybody goes on trips. Everybody disappears for 2 or 3 months. Today is our first video podcast. We will have this show on my YouTube channel next week. We are working out some formatting issues with the video company, and you'll be able to watch it next week on my YouTube channel. There'll be some shorts on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Check us out. Don't have the voice for radio, surely do not have the face for TV, but we're going to do it anyway. So check us out on my YouTube channel, Joe Ingram Law, LLC. Number of concerts will be in town for the summer, and one that kind of sparked my interest was Hank Williams Jr. is scheduled to be here June the 26th at the Coca-Cola Outdoor Theater. I got to see Hank Williams Jr. for the first time when I was in high school. And considering his age, I thought, well, this may be the last time to see him. So I'm considering going to see Hank Williams Jr. at the end of the month, and I would encourage you to as well if you want to see Hank Williams Jr. There's been some news come out this week related to the primaries, the elections. In the Attorney General's race, Pam Casey, who came up short on the Republican side of the ticket, came out and endorsed Jay Mitchell this week for the Attorney General's race. A little shocked by that. The Attorney General's race was heated. It was a hotly contested race between the three candidates. I'm still going to say that I think Catherine Robertson carries the day and wins the election. I haven't seen anything else that changes my mind. I think the commercials are off TV. I hadn't seen them here in the last week, but been incredibly busy in court. I imagine that they'll run them hot and heavy the week right before the election. But I still think Catherine Robertson carries the day in that race. As always, we encourage you to listen to our podcast, download it, share it, like it with your friends and family, even your enemies. Listen to our show, help us grow our broadcast. If you could go to my podcast, give us a 5-star review. We're moving up in the podcast rankings. Just give us a 5-star review if you watch and listen to the show. It helps us move the needle. My office represents people from Huntsville, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, and Mobile. If you need representation, please call my office, 205-825-5297, 205-825-5297. Speak with an intake specialist, and we will get you in for a consultation. Joe Ingram Law is all you need to know, or you can Google joeingramlaw.com for all your legal needs in the state of Alabama. Today we're going to talk about some national legal stories. We're going to talk about some state legal stories that have happened this week, and then we're going to talk about some criminal law issues this time of year. Believe it or not, when the weather gets hotter, crime goes up. I do not know what the correlation is, but it's just a fact of life. Crime goes up in the summer. Don't know why. So, before we talk about the Biden story this week, Joe Biden, we got to get this out of the way. One person that will not be a candidate for the Democratic presidential primary in 2028 is Gretchen Whitmer. She came out this week and said, "It's a no-go for me. I'm out." She claims that her advisors told her that she needed to take some time off and recharge her batteries. No, that's not what happened. They've done some polling, and she will not play well in all of the red states of the country. She can play well on the elitist coast and the blue states, but she would not have a prayer in the deep south. Not a chance. And when that story came out, they've already done some polling statistics. Real Clear Politics has already done some polls. Former Vice President Kamala Harris is polling at 24%. 24%. Gavin Newsom, California governor, 16. Pete Buttigieg is at 14. And the socialist of New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is at 14%. A socialist in America is polling at 14% for the Democratic Party. Are you kidding me? Is that who you want to put up for your candidate in America as a socialist? Does well for the Republican Party. Makes it easy. I can tell you right now who the Democratic nominee will be in 28. If I were going to make a bet today, and you can go bet on these things, you can actually go make a bet today. This is who I would bet on today as the Democratic presidential nominee in 28. He is flying way below the radar. He is doing every podcast. He's doing interviews 3 or 4 days a week. Nobody's really talking about him. Rahm Emanuel. He is a serious-minded candidate. He knows all of the issues. He knows how to take big issues and simplify them so that you can understand them. And he was President Obama's chief of staff. He knows D.C. He knows all the players. He's a very sensible guy. He's not a far left-wing fringe candidate. Now, will he satisfy all the people in the Democratic Party? Not sure. But he is somebody that would have national appeal as a moderate. And so I'm telling you right now, I think it's going to be somebody like Rahm Emanuel. They want to win so bad, they're going to put somebody up that has appeal to the mainstream of America, Central America, the independents. So that gets us down to the Joe Biden story this week and Jill Biden. Jill Biden wrote a book. President Biden sued President Trump and the DOJ this week because he does not want the tapes released when he was president and he was interviewed. They had to appoint a special prosecutor for his case because they were looking at him for the same issue about President Trump, about having national documents in your home unsecured up at his house up in Pennsylvania or Delaware, excuse me. And so the tapes some of them have been leaked. The tapes are not good for him. They show that he has dementia. They show that he doesn't have any understanding of day-to-day of the presidency. So he's trying to keep those tapes out. Jill Biden writes a book. She talks about the primary. She talks about the debate with President Trump. And she made a comment. And it went viral this week. And she said that Joe said he really screwed up the debate. And her comment to Joe Biden was, yes, you did. No. It was not just the debate, Jill Biden. If you were watching Joe Biden during his presidency, he did not hold cabinet meetings. He did not have very few press conferences. He rarely answered a question on camera that wasn't scripted, or he didn't know what the question was because he couldn't answer a question. So it wasn't the debate. It had nothing to do with the debate. Here's what happened. They had a fundraiser for Joe Biden. And George Clooney is the one that pushed Joe Biden off the cliff. He's the one that came out after the fundraiser and said, I met with Joe Biden and he doesn't have a clue what's going on. He's got to go. Had nothing to do with the debate. The issues about Joe Biden not knowing what was going on had been out there for 4 years. George Clooney is what scared all the money people away. And so the Democrats do what they always do because they believe in the cause. The cause is bigger than any one person. They threw Joe Biden off the cliff. So the story about Jill Biden and claiming that Joe Biden, she thought he had a stroke emergency that night. No. And if you thought he had a stroke, why didn't you call the paramedics and stop the debate? Doesn't hold water for me. Not one bit. Not one bit. Some stories that we're going to talk about today, you will not hear anywhere else because they're legal stories and they're not mainstream stories, but they're important stories. One story I want to talk about is a retired Air Force pilot, Gerald Eddie Brown, who was arrested back in February of this year. He was an Air Force pilot during the first Gulf War. He flew F-15s, F-16s, A-10s between 1990 and 91. He retired from the Air Force. He went to work for another company as a pilot. Lost that job because he got in a fight with somebody at work. And I think this story falls into the category of he wanted to fly so bad because it was his identity. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a fighter pilot and fly planes? So he somehow got in touch with somebody with China. And they said, why don't you move to China and teach our pilots how to fly fighter planes? So he did. He moved to China. And he recently came back to the United States. and he was arrested by the feds. And they charged him with U.S. arms control laws by providing unauthorized training to Chinese Air Force personnel. He is in federal custody. He had a hearing this week. Evidence is starting to come out about his emails talking about how he was looking forward to going to China to learn to fly planes. He is facing approximately 6 to 8 years in federal prison if he is convicted of the charge. So that's a story we're following because it falls under the category of national security. This time of year, the United States Supreme Court is winding down. The Supreme Court ends their term at the end of June. So for the next 30 days, we will be getting a lot of big decisions that the Supreme Court heard this term. Every week, they'll be releasing opinions. 2 opinions came out this week, and one of them was authored by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. This case is called Rutherford versus the United States. And it was 2 cases that were merged together from the circuits that worked its way up to the Supreme Court. It was a challenge of the First Step Act that was passed in 2018. And these 2 people had serious federal sentences. One gentleman had a 42-year sentence for armed robberies that he was convicted in 2003. The other one, Johnny Carter, had a sentence of 70 years for his role in a string of armed bank robberies in 2007. So one guy got 42 years, the other one got 70 years. And so they appealed their sentences under the 2018 First Step Act, which would have given them a chance to get a lower sentence now than they would have received prior to the Congress passing the new law. And they would have received 14 and 21 years respectively if they had been passed under the new law. And so they filed an appeal and they applied for hardship, compassionate release. And the Supreme Court heard the case, and it was a 6-3 ruling, which means it was the conservatives on one side and 3 Democrat presidential nominated judges on the other side of the case. And Justice Barrett ruled that Congress had never intended to make a class of offenders sentenced in the years before the reform law was enacted eligible for a sentencing reduction under the First Step Act. Compassionate release is available only when a court finds that extraordinary and compelling reasons warrant a sentence reduction. So Justice Sotomayor wrote an opinion for the dissenting, and she said that the Sentencing Commission was well within the expansive scope of the terms of extraordinary and compelling, and should have been considered to lower their federal sentences. I think I agree with the justice in this case that if Congress had intended for the law to be ex post facto, they would have said that it applies to prior sentences. So you do not get to go back in time when they change the law to change your sentence. They are stuck with the sentence that they received. We talked about this case back at the first year. Matthew Perry, the Friends actor, Matthew Perry, that died in a hot tub. He had drug issues. This week, his personal assistant was sentenced in federal court for administering the fatal doses of ketamine to him. His personal assistant received a sentence of 41 months in federal court. This case hasn't gotten a lot of national attention, but it follows the same scenario of Michael Jackson, if you remember that case, where his personal physician was giving him, propofol to help him go to sleep. He went to prison too. I'm pretty sure he lost his medical license. All of these stars that have people around them, they're all yes people. None of them know when to say no, and none of them know when to protect the star from themselves or their own addiction. Not sure I agree with sentencing someone unless they gave them the dose without their consent. If they were just providing the medication to them, I don't know that you federally charge somebody for somebody's own drug dependency or addiction. Not sure I agree with this story of this sentencing. Not sure I agree with this one. But it is what it is. So 2 people now have been sentenced related to Matthew Perry, the actor, and his death. We got a case I want to talk about, and we're going to go to break here in a minute. There was a federal judge in Atlanta this week that was reprimanded for some conduct. I want to talk about this case because there's been several judges in the news in the last week related to issues of being on the bench. And the other big story about judges this week is there was another story out Thursday about Justice Amy Coney Barrett. There was a issue at her house, a security issue. It's funny how those issues do not happen to the Democratic justices. It only happens to the Republican judges. Somebody tried to kill Kavanaugh a couple of years ago. That person's in federal court now, federal custody. I am very concerned about judges' security in this country. Whether you agree or disagree with their opinions or their positions, they should not be put in harm's way for doing their job. Being a federal judge is a lifetime appointment. It's a tough job. You want them to call balls and strikes as they see them, and you do not want them to be worried about their safety for doing their job. We've never had anything like this in the history of our country until about 22, when the Roe versus Wade opinion that came out that overturned the abortion decision. That's when all this really started. And shame on the Democrats, because when people were marching outside the justice's home, no one stood up in the Congress, Senate, or House of Republicans and said, leave them alone. They have a day job. That's their home. That's where their family is. They're entitled to safety and privacy. Shame on them for this. And it's continuing, and it's getting worse. And we are starting to lose people on the federal judiciary that are leaving because they do not want to be subjected to this anymore. We're going to go to news and weather. We'll be back after that. Stay tuned.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right. This is Joe Ingram, Legal Lowdown, your Alabama lawyer. We're back for the second segment of the first hour. May is in the books. Yeah, May's over. Come and gone so fast. Oh, my goodness. Okay. You're listening to on WERC in Birmingham, WBHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. For all those who have called the show in the last week or so, thank you so much. Thank you. Some of you have already become clients of mine. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, before we went to the break, we were talking about judges in the news this week. There was a judge over in Georgia, Northern District of Georgia, Judge Eleanor Ross, was reprimanded for allegedly having sex in her chambers. She was appointed by President Obama in 2014. She had been a state court judge, federal prosecutor, had even been a state prosecutor. And some of her prior law clerks are the ones that ratted her out, turned her in. And so the 11th Circuit impaneled a judicial conduct committee to investigate the matter. And allegedly it was a two-year relationship with someone that worked as a Atlanta police officer, no less. And in the findings by the judicial committee panel, they determined that it demonstrated a gross lack of judgment and resulted in a chambers workplace that was extremely uncomfortable and troubling for the clerks. There's two ways I want to talk about this. One, we have raised two generations of snowflakes. I have seen them the last couple of years in my own law clerks. They're snowflakes. If you say something to them, they'll cry. And if they don't get their way, they feel like they deserve a medal or an A. There was a story last week that Harvard has decided to go back and we're only going to give so many A's in a class again. Not everybody's going to get an A just for showing up. There's winners and there's losers. Anyway, enough of that. The committee found that the judge was having an inappropriate relationship on the clock in a federal courthouse with somebody of the Atlanta Police Department, and it was a long-term affair. What you do in your private life is your private life. I really don't care about that. But if you're in a federal courthouse, you need to stick to federal business. And so the relationship went on for 2 years, and the committee came down. And this is what's kind of troubling to me, not so much for what the judge received as a punishment, but what's behind it. The committee decided to give Judge Ross a private reprimand for her misconduct. After the committee decided that she should write written apologies to the former clerks that made them feel uncomfortable. And she also had to agree to never serve as the chief judge of the Northern District of Georgia, and also not to ever serve on judicial leadership roles. Some people have come out and said the punishment was too light, and some have said that the judge's misconduct strikes at the heart of judicial integrity and destroys public confidence in an impartial, ethical court system. And that is what my concern is, because the person that she alleged to have an affair with was someone of the police department. So all those cases that came before the judge in that time period, if they came from the Atlanta Police Department, did she receive information that was outside the scope of what she would have knowledge of before she heard a case or decided a case? I don't know. But there have been instances where people have gotten in trouble, whether they be officers or judges or prosecutors. And so they have to go back and look at all those cases that came during their time to make sure the conviction was not biased, free of prejudice, on the up and up. That is my concern for all those cases that came before her in that time. Now, it could be that they just didn't want to do the legwork, because federal judges have lots of cases. They have hundreds of cases a year, and maybe they just didn't want to take the time to investigate that. So, I really don't care what you do on your own time, but when you have the ability to affect someone's liberty and freedom, and you're allegedly having an affair with somebody that's an officer, that's a concern for me as a defense lawyer. And by the way, this is the judge that heard the Todd and Julie Chrisley tax evasion case that President Trump gave them a pardon and got them out of jail. That was a major case. It lasted, I think, 4 or 6 weeks, the trial. So that is my concern about that case. The other case I was talking to you before we went to break, federal judges are being targeted for doing their job right now. And I did not know this until this week. I know judges have federal detail, but I didn't know the scope of the number of judges that are having that kind of level of security right now. On Thursday of this week, there was a swatting call to Justice Amy Coney Barrett's home. And what this is a call made to the 911 reporter, and they claimed that there were 2 or 3 gunshots and voices arguing at Justice Barrett's home. And so they started calling, and they recognized her address because she has protection detail from the court and probably federal marshals. And anyway, there was no merit to the facts of the case of anything happening wrong at her home. She did not discuss it on the bench this week when she read 2 opinions from the court. But the issue here is swatting involves making a false emergency report designed to bring armed officer to a victim's location. You don't see this happening to liberal left-leaning judges. You only see this happening to conservative justices or presumed conservative justices. In fact, the number of instances are growing every year. People that are politicians need to be careful how they speak about the judiciary and the jobs that they do. The justices on the Supreme Court have received 24-hour security detail since the 2022 decision of the draft of the Roe versus Wade opinion. Are you telling me that a building that has 9 justices, and I think each justice has 4 law clerks each term. So you're talking about 36 law clerks, 9 judges. I know the 9 judges didn't leak it. You're telling me out of 36 people, you couldn't find the person that leaked that opinion? You could. In fact, they probably know. I've talked about this a number of times. Why did they not prosecute the person or out the person? Was it to protect their legal career because they were a law clerk at the Supreme Court? It doesn't matter where you work. When you work in a courthouse and you're privy to information, it is to stay confidential. You're not supposed to put it out there before it becomes made a public opinion. And also, think about it this way. What happened last week? The former South Carolina lawyer that was found guilty of killing his wife and his son, what's his name, Murdaugh? Thank you, John. That clerk of the court, she pled guilty to perjury because they said that she had given some information to the jurors to sway their decision delivery in this case. And so the court said, because of that, I'm sorry, he's going to get a new trial. Can you imagine what this is going to cost the taxpayers? How long did that case last? 4 or 6 weeks? It was on TV. So when you have these positions, you got to treat them with the confidentiality that comes with them. So anyway, the threats against the judges have been growing exponentially across the United States. I saw this report this week. Last year, hundreds of pizzas were sent to the homes of judges and members of their families in a signal the senders knew where they lived. In other words, we sent a pizza to your house to let you know where we know where you live. Some of the pizzas were sent under the name of a New Jersey judge's son who was murdered in 2020. They murdered a judge's son. Do you remember that one? Also, it was disclosed this week, or back in September, Justice Barrett acknowledged that pizzas had also been sent to members of her family. So now you're intimidating their family for doing their job? There was a judicial conference this week by the Federal Bar Association in Los Angeles. Go figure, this week of all times. And at this Federal Bar Association, they warned that the increased security risk to judges. More than 90 judges nationwide now require enhanced security. Enhanced security to do your job. This concerns me on so many levels. Our politicians have got to speak out and tell people, whether you agree or disagree with their decisions, they're doing a job, and it's a hard job. But Justice Barrett kept a stiff upper lip this week from the bench and did not even acknowledge it. Good for her. And by the way, they did not make the 911 recording public, which tells me that they are going to find this person and they are going to be prosecuted. Just wait until it comes out. Some state legal news this week. All right, so we're getting down to the runoff of the primaries. There was a report this week on the United States Senator race for the state of Alabama. Barry Moore, the congressman, versus the newcomer, former Navy SEAL Jared Hudson. There was a poll conducted, and the poll determined that Barry Moore has a lead in the runoff. Go figure. The poll indicated that 53% of the people that were polled said they were going to vote for Moore. 36% said they were going to vote for Hudson. So 53, 36, that's 9, 86, that's 14% that were either undecided or independent. I still think Barry Moore wins this race. And this falls under the category of what happened this week in Texas. I don't think Trump's missed one yet. If he endorses a candidate, the candidate takes the case. The Senate race out in Texas between John Cornyn and the Attorney General Paxton. Cornyn's been in the Senate a long time, has a long record to run on, and I think he got beat handedly. The race was called early Tuesday night. If Trump gives you the endorsement and they really push it and put the money behind it, you're gone. That's the same thing for the other senator of Louisiana. Can't think of his name right now to save my life, but he lost in the primaries a couple of weeks ago too. So Trump still has an effect if he gives you an endorsement. It carries weight with the voters. The other big story that's come out this last week, Steve Marshall has done some great work. He has been pushing for the courts to adopt and accept the redrawing of the district lines for the elections in August. This thing snowballed really fast back in May. The Supreme Court came out in the case of Louisiana versus Callis, and it involved the same issue about the redrawing of district lines. And so Alabama jumped on it like a heartbeat, and the state legislature passed the lines, and Kay Ivey signed it into law. And then some people on the Democratic side of the ticket filed a federal lawsuit to challenge it. 3 justices heard the case. They said, no, it's still discriminatory how you've drawn the lines. It violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And Alabama has appealed that to the Supreme Court. And we hope to get a decision by June the 1st. Because if we don't get a decision by June the 1st, I don't know how they pull the election off in August. I don't know how you'd have time to get candidates out there to run for this special election if you don't do this here really fast. So I think we're going to get some news on this week from the Supreme Court, whether they are going to allow it to go forward or if they're going to stay it again and hear the case for the third time. This will be the third time the case has been up for an issue. I saw a story on Friday yesterday that the 11th Circuit had issued a stay for the injunction to let the Supreme Court decide. The Supreme Court is not one to really jump into emergency stays unless they feel like the law is clear and has already been decided by the court. My guess is the Supreme Court will not make a decision, and I don't think the primaries will happen in August. If I was placing a bet on this, but maybe wrong. We'll have to wait and see. Oh, my goodness. This next story related to the former Birmingham Waterworks Board. What are we calling this thing now? The Central Alabama Water Board? Okay. Give it a new name. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, they're shaking their head over here. They're going, yes. There are 3 lawsuits now for the Central Alabama Water Board. Another lawsuit was filed this week. A Jefferson County judge has the case, and they are asking the court to appoint an independent receiver to oversee the utility. They are wasting millions of dollars fighting in court. You know who's getting all the money? The lawyers. Yes, and you're shaking your head. Yes, the lawyer's getting all the money. And look, as far as the firing of the people at the Waterworks Board, I have no problem with that. And here's why. They were probably top heavy of admin folks or people that worked in the offices. With all the technology today, we probably could do away with some of those folks. Now, the gentlemen and women that work on the crews out in the street, we need more of those, because everywhere I go, there's always something wrong with the water lines. We need the people out in the field doing those jobs. They're trying to make this case a class action lawsuit, which was news to me until I started reading this week. I think they have a very good argument, the defense lawyers. I don't know how you keep this case in Jefferson County, because all of the potential jurors have an interest in the case. So there are 3 lawsuits pending now related to the Central Alabama Water Board. One of them has to do with the unfinished renovations to the Lake Purdy Dam in Shelby County that's not finished. One issue is about the 200 employees that were let go and of the physical payment center. Every time I had to call the Waterworks Board last week myself, guess how long I had to stay online? They come on and they say, "You're number 47 in the queue." I'm thinking, are there 47 minutes left in your day? I don't know what the problem is with the Waterworks Board. Alabama Power is run so much better. I am starting to believe that the Central Alabama Water Board needs to be bought out or taken over by another entity of people to run it, because everybody they put in charge either has some monetary interest or some personal gain of power in this position, in these positions. And the citizens of Central Alabama that use the Birmingham water service are the ones that are paying through the nose. I'm starting to believe that somebody else needs to run this. It's always in the news. I don't understand it for the life of me about the Waterworks Board. Don't get it. Don't get it. I do think the case needs to be moved to another county. I do not think anybody in Jefferson County could be a juror on the case, because you have an interest in the outcome of the case. Why would you not vote against the Central Waterworks Board if the case were to go to trial? That's just common sense. So we shall see how that turns out in the coming weeks. For those of you that have called my office in the last 2 weeks, thank you for calling, and thank you for those that have become my clients. This show makes my job easier once you make a call to the office. If you've listened to the show, you've listened a number of times, you've already kind of developed a relationship with me. And when you come in, the hard part is done. We just sit down and talk about the case. You've already made the decision that you're going to either retain me or not when you call my office. So thank you for those that have come to become clients of my office here in the last few weeks. In the second hour, we're going to talk about some criminal law issues. Yes, as we get into the summer months, people drink a lot. People use recreational drugs. They get hyped up and they make bad decisions. Has something to do with the weather. People are out more. They're not locked in their homes. And this is when people start getting lots of DUIs. Domestic violence calls go up like triple in the summer. I don't know why. I do not know why. Domestic violence calls go up huge in the summer. So we're going to talk about some criminal law issues for the summer months, things that you need to avoid. And believe it or not, domestic violence issues go hand in hand with people that have divorces and PFAs, protection from abuse orders. We're going to talk about that in the second hour, and we'll be back after news and weather at the top of the hour. See you in a minute.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer on WERC 105.5 in Birmingham, WBHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. May is in the books. This is the second hour of this show. Saw a report on the news yesterday. Huntsville is growing by leaps and bounds. I saw a report yesterday. They are building a new hospital in Huntsville, $50 million. And to go along with it, they're building some contractor out of Phoenix, Arizona has already agreed to build 1,500 new homes. Think about the economic trickle-down effect of all this up in Huntsville. If I were starting my career or my life in Alabama, Huntsville is the place to be. Huntsville has great infrastructure. I've said this before because of all the engineers up there in the interstate. Huntsville is beautiful downtown. Huntsville is clean. Huntsville is a great place to be to start your career. As I told you during the first hour, for those of you that call my office from the show, thank you. And those of you that have become clients, thank you very much. This show already takes the edge off before you come in the door. You heard my voice, as bad as it sounds, and we've kind of already developed a relationship. And so it makes it so much easier when you come in the door for the consultation. That doesn't always mean that we make a merger to become attorney-client, because we still go through that process. But it makes it so much easier. Okay, so second hour, we're going to talk about some criminal issues. Something about the summer, something in the water. People drink beer, people drink wine, use recreational drugs, make bad decisions. It's a fact of life, folks. It's a fact of life. I don't know why, but it happens every year. So we're going to talk about some domestic violence issues today, and how this can affect your life in a bad way for the long term. And it can also have implications related to your divorce case in certain situations. So that is what we're going to talk about. All right. So here we are. Criminal law and crime goes up in the summer. I had a new client this week that retained me has a serious violent case. In fact, it's a manslaughter case related to a car. And the person did not have any money, but the family did. And family said, Mr. Ingram, we'd like to hire you to represent our family member. I said, okay, good. And the discussion came around about, well, should we just use a public defender or a court-appointed lawyer, and if the case goes to trial, then hire you closer to time? And I said, well, the decision is totally yours, but I want you to think about something, whether you retain me or you have a public defender. The way this case was described to me, it was important that this case needed a reconstruction expert of the crime scene. And there's a great company here in Birmingham, in Alabama, that I've used before for this in a manslaughter case. And they do a lot of cases for plaintiff lawyers in accidents and truck accidents and things of that nature. So they're great at what they do. And I said, even if you hire me and my client is determined indigent by the court, there is some case law that says I've been paid by the family, my client's indigent, but I need a court-ordered expert, and I need for the state of Alabama to pay for it because my client is entitled to a proper defense. And the court agreed with me. And they said, yes, we're going to give it to you. So the family was happy. My client was elated. They decided to go ahead and hire me. And you cannot just accept the state or the government or the state troopers that worked the case. And I'm not saying they did a bad job or going to do a bad job. All I'm saying is that you are entitled to have an expert to give you your own opinion of what happened at that scene of the accident. You may be able to go pull some video footage from cameras, Alabama DOT, whatever, black boxes, people that saw it, tire marks on the road, on the shoulder of the road, whatever. You're entitled to have an expert opinion determine what was the cause and what really happened at this crime scene, especially when somebody's charged with manslaughter and they're facing a Class B felony, 2 to 20 years in prison. So you cannot just take the state or the troopers at their word and that they have the right conclusion. We are entitled to draw our own conclusion from the evidence that's out there. So that does not mean that you have to make an argument to the court. You have to make a good faith argument that you need an independent evaluation of the scene. You got to show to the court why it's necessary that you need for the state to pay for this, because it's not cheap. It's not cheap to do one of these. I had a second case this week, same kind of scenario I want to talk about. I have a client charged with a sex crime. Client is charged with a sex crime. And based on the evidence that has been provided to us by the prosecutors, there is a number of distinctions between the timeline, the chronology of what happened on the day and time, of phone calls, of text messages between the parties. In fact, there are at least maybe 4 or 5 different interpretations of the timeline and the chronology. And so I filed a motion with the court, and I said, we need an independent forensic cell phone search of the person's phone. And the prosecutor jumped up and down. Well, we've never done that before in a criminal case. He's asking for something new that we've never done. And I said, well, we do it all the time in divorce cases. And the judge said, well, Joe, this isn't a divorce case. The person that you're asking to search their phone isn't a party to the case. I said, well, they're not necessarily a party, but they're the victim of the case, and their story is the factual basis of the criminal charge. So it's very relevant. It's very important. Need to know. And so then they had 3 prosecutors at the table trying to make an intelligent argument of why I shouldn't have a mirror image of the cell phone of the date and time of the accident. And the judge said, you're being prosecutors. You're not being independent. Joe's got a right to defend his client. So in that situation, I said, I tell you what. I said, just give me a narrow scope of time to search the phone. Maybe a 14-day window. That's all I need. I'm not asking to search the person's life forever. Just give me a limited scope. That's all I really need. Because it's going to make a difference when the case goes to trial on the timeline. Whether it matches up with statements that have already been given to police officers, case agents, people that are going to testify in the trial. It goes to the credibility of the people that are going to testify in the courtroom. Did it happen one way, or did it happen the way we think it happened? Makes a difference. So, in criminal cases, experts are becoming much more needed with the technology we have today. And if you don't ask for it, you're just setting your client up not to have a proper defense. And you're also setting yourself up to having to face a Rule 32 petition or a 2255 in federal court for not defending your client adequately for investigating the case to see what happened. So all of these situations are important in a criminal case. Experts, cell phones, crime scene reconstruction experts, people that check DNA, people that check blood work, people that check the blood alcohol level to make sure that the proper equipment's working properly in a DUI case. All this is important in a criminal case in front of a jury. I was in court this week. Sometimes you just have to tell a joke to lighten the mood. Now, before I tell you this, I want to explain this situation. I'm not saying the situation is serious. I'm not saying that the case is not important to my client. I'm not saying I don't take anything seriously. I do. I get it. Sometimes you have to lighten up, Francis. And here's where I want to go with this. I was in federal court this week. I was sitting next to my client. We were waiting on the federal judge to come in. I could tell that my client was nervous, obviously anxious. And I kind of just leaned over. I knew we had about 10 minutes. I said, can I tell you a quick joke? My client looked at me, and they were like, I guess, you crazy idiot, if you think that's really appropriate here. I said, just let me tell you a joke. And here's why. Let me just get through this. I told them a little joke. They smiled. They laughed. And they said, thank you. I needed that. Here's where I'm going with this. Just by laughing for a minute, it lowered their blood pressure probably 10 points. It took the anxiety off of them for a minute. Nothing is as bad as you create it in your mind. Nothing is as bad as we create the outcome in our mind. We have the ability, innate, to have the worst case scenario that's going to happen. On the flip side of that coin, let me tell you this. A case is never as good as you think it is. And you're going to say, well, Joe, what do you mean by that? Well, when I have a client come in and they tell me a story about a case, and I put my blinders on like a racehorse to be their advocate and to believe my client and their position, you think this is a slam dunk. This is a great case. How can I not win? But then if you've practiced long enough and you sit back, you have to think, what is the other side of the story? There are going to be two sides of the story, right? There's somebody else in the case. Sometimes there's three sides to a story. So it's not just what you hear from your client. There's another side of the story. So sometimes it's good just to laugh a minute and not take everything so serious that we build up in our minds. I had a case back around the holidays. This person was getting a divorce. I did not represent the person. They were referred to me, and they called me on a Friday, and they said, can I see you today? I need to see you. I have a lawyer, but I'm going to probably hire you to represent me. I said, yes, come in. We'll set up the appointment, do our usual ethical duty. I tell them, I'm going to call your lawyer and tell them that you're coming to see me, because I would want the same if my client was out shopping new lawyers as well. And clients are always hesitant at first. I said, well, either you're really serious or you're not. Okay, make the call. Client comes in, and we have the consultation. This is why I do a 60 to 90-minute consultation. This is why. You do not get this in 10 minutes. You do not get this in 30 minutes. Sometimes you don't get this in 60 minutes. But within 90 minutes, I'm pretty good at getting this information. I want to ask you enough questions and enough information to see if I can get you to either laugh, smile, or just have some personality outside of the legal issue that you have. It tells me a lot about you. This person came in very serious, very stressed out. Their face was blood red. You could see the veins in their neck, their blood pressure in their neck. You could see it pulsing in their neck. You could tell this person was on the edge. In fact, I was very concerned about this person, whether or not they were suicidal that weekend. I mean, I could see it on them. They were really stressed out. And about 70 minutes into the interview, I said, I'm not sure I can help you, because for 70 minutes I've made maybe 3 or 4 different jokes, and they're not good jokes. I'm not funny, but just a way to see if I could break the stress and the tension in the room. And not one time did you take the bait. And I'm not sure that whatever outcome I get you will satisfy you. And then somehow or another, it got that person's attention. It disarmed them. And we started talking about some jokes, and the person relaxed. And the client retained me that Friday. Believe it or not, we settled that divorce case in less than 21 days. The case had been going on for maybe 8 months. It came down to the counsel on each side of the table knew each other. We had good chemistry, credibility. We respected each other. We could talk about the case. We could talk about the good, bad, and the ugly, the strengths, the weaknesses of the case. And so it made it easier to reach a resolution of the issues in the divorce case. Very important. So sometimes just taking a breath, telling a joke, having a little humor can really take the edge off. That's all you got to do. Just tell a joke sometimes, be a little funny. All right. So domestic violence is a term that ranges from abusive behaviors perpetrated by one person against another person in a domestic setting, such as in a marriage or cohabitation, meaning you live together but you're not legally married, what we used to call common law marriage, but Alabama does not recognize anymore. Domestic violence can include physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial control, and even psychological manipulation. Physical abuse is often the most visible form, involving actions like hitting, slapping, or other forms of physical harm. Emotional abuse, though less visible, can equally be damaging and include assaults. Financial abuse involves controlling a partner's access to financial resources, thereby limiting their independence. Understanding these various forms is crucial as they can lead to legal consequences in a divorce case. And so anytime I have a new divorce client, we talk about a lot of these issues to see if the client needs a PFA, protection from abuse order, or if they need to be concerned about their spouse filing one against them in a divorce case. And domestic violence has changed so much in the last 20 years of practicing law. Today, a conviction for domestic violence can and will affect your job, can and will affect your ability to have a firearm, to have a gun, and can affect how or whether or not you have custody of your children. So domestic violence cases can be very serious. They can be misdemeanors, and they can be all the way to felonies of domestic violence. One of the most pervasive misconceptions about domestic violence charges is that it only involves physical harm. This narrow view overlooks the impact of emotional and psychological abuse, which can be equally damaging under the law. Another common myth is that domestic violence charges are always based on clear and undeniable evidence. Domestic violence cases, in reality, hinge on the credibility of the misunderstandings about the nature of the domestic violence and can lead to unfair judgments. And the stigmas can dispel the myths of these cases. If you have a jury trial for domestic violence, jurors who believe that only physical abuse constitutes domestic violence may be less sympathetic to victims of emotional abuse. Emotional abuse can go on for years by one spouse or another and can be very damaging. Individuals falsely accused of domestic violence may find it challenging to clear their name due to the societal stigma attached to these type of charges. sometimes it can make it hard to go apply for a new job if you have a domestic violence conviction, because no one wants to put someone like that in a job around other people if HR's got to be concerned whether you're going to go postal in the office. So domestic violence convictions carry a lot of weight in our society. We're going to go to news and weather, and then we're going to wrap up the final segment of the week. And May's in the book, and we'll be back at the bottom at the after the news and weather break.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right, you're listening to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer on WERC 105.5 in Birmingham, WBHP up in Huntsville, BHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. This is the final segment of the show for the week. May is in the books. It's gone. We've been talking about domestic violence before the break. Domestic violence cases can be resolved by the parties if, let's say, they are married or in a living arrangement. Sometimes the person that called the police can sign an affidavit telling the prosecution that they agree with dismissing the case, that it was a bad night, and they will not hold anybody accountable for dismissing the case or try to sue the police department or the prosecutor. They'll do that all the time. And then there are those kind of domestic violence cases in which the prosecutor says to the victim, I don't care if you participate or not. This case is bad enough. We're going to go forward with prosecuting the case. We expended money, time, resources. There is significant damage in the house. There's damage to you personally going to the hospital, and we're going to prosecute this person. So DV cases that are misdemeanors can be resolved easily. Sometimes people have to take an anger management class, and then the case will be dismissed. And then you can always come back later and have the whole case expunged off your record, even being arrested. That is a possibility. I've even had a DV2, domestic violence strangulation case, that was totally dismissed. Those are rare. I've had that happen twice in my career. Couple, they weren't married, but they living together, and bad argument in the house, and one person was really big and one person was small, and somebody got thrown through some sheetrock and had a shoulder injury. And we got the case resolved. It took a lot of work, but cooler heads prevailed and saw an outcome. Had another case that was similar, a DV2 case. Couple got in a fight one night. Drugs and alcohol were involved. And I think there was even a kitchen knife involved. Somebody was going to stab the other party. Everybody agreed to dismiss that case with a tongue lashing from the prosecutor in the courtroom, who said, if any one of you get in trouble in the next 5 years, I'm going to bring this case back for prosecution. That was a rare one-off occasion. because it was so serious, the violence in that case. That was just that was a lucky outcome in that case. Those don't come across often in domestic violence cases. Consequences of domestic violence can be severe and far-reaching. Individuals may face jail time, huge fines, and the issuance of a restraining order that can significantly impact their daily lives. You could have a lifetime restraining order put against you not to ever be around this person again, ever. It can keep you from owning a gun. It can affect your employment. And it can also affect your custodial arrangement if you're divorced with your children and your ex-spouse. So domestic violence cases are serious. And they also can tarnish your reputation, making it hard to rebuild your personal and professional relationships. And we talked about how employers and HR may be hesitant to hire someone convicted of a domestic violence case. So those are all serious and long-term implications from a DV case. Going along with that, this time of year, I always have clients that will call me that are going through a custody case or a child modification case. And the conversation will be something like, well, Joe, my ex-spouse is at work and my child is at home by themselves for the summer. Is that proper? And is that being a good parent, leaving the child unattended during the day for the summer? And, we live in a society where more often than not, everybody has a job outside the home, moms and dads. And most people work full time. And other than camps and vacation plans, sometimes children are left at home unattended by themselves. Now, when I was growing up, this is back in the 70s, all the kids in my neighborhood, we were outside from daylight to dark, playing soccer, kickball, bicycles. If we had gardens, we were picking vegetables. We would catch fireflies at night in jars. Go to the pool. Just, we're outside all the time. We didn't grow up with social media and the internet. And we drank water out of a hose pipe. If you did that, you're thinking about that right now, having water out of a hose pipe that's hot. Most people don't do that anymore, but I still do when I run. I ran by a gas station the other day, and they had a hose pipe on the ground. And I said, I just need a little drink of water to get me to the end. So, but anyway, parents will call me and they'll say, Joe, how do you feel about my ex-spouse having my child at home by themselves? And the issue always becomes, well, what's the law in Alabama? What do they recommend? Well, Alabama doesn't have a law that says that a child under a certain age has to be with supervision. There's no law about that in the state of Alabama at all. Now, there's some basic understandings that we all have that are common sense. While we don't have a specific age to be left at home, it's largely left to the parents' judgment. And the key question here is simple. Is the child mature enough to handle it by themselves? it comes down to their level of maturity as a child. There are kids in the first grade that know how to cook. And there are kids in the 12th grade that's never done anything for themselves. So it comes down to the comfort level of the adult and the child of, can my child be alone to take care of themselves while I'm at work during the summer? Experts on this. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends parents wait until age 11. They state younger children are typically unprepared to handle emergencies independently. The American Academy of Pediatrics suggests starting with short trial runs and setting clear rules like whether friends can come over and what to do if a stranger knocks or something seems wrong when they enter the door. Also, a child should also be able to handle basic tasks and access a phone in an emergency. They should also have essential details like your phone number, home address, access codes, just in case they needed to call 911. Other factors would include the child, whether they would be watching other young siblings, if they can follow safety rules and the emergency plan. Does the parent check in during the day, check in during lunchtime, check in during the afternoon, see what's going on? This can fall into the category of where I'm headed next. And I've had this happen in a couple cases here recently. Alabama child neglect laws. What and when to report. You live in a neighborhood and you see a family down the street and you see that the child is home alone for the summer and you're thinking this child is being neglected. No one's watching this child. It's scary. Do you call DHR, Department of Human Resources, and report that the child is being neglected? I would strongly encourage people, please do not call DHR unless it's really necessary, because you're opening a can of worms. Unless you know that the child is not being fed food, basic shelter, medical treatment, clothing, things of that nature, the child is being harmed. Now, those are all real neglect. But if the child is just home for the summer because mom and dad is working, please do not open Pandora's box and call DHR. I had a case start this week. Somebody called DHR on my client and made an allegation. And DHR just shows up at the home. Says, hey, we want to talk to you. There's been a report made. Now, if they don't have a search warrant, you don't have to let them in your house. There's nothing that says you have to let somebody in your house that doesn't have a search warrant. It goes under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. My client had enough good sense. The person said, I want to talk to a lawyer before I talk to you. Is that okay? Caseworker said, fine. Client calls me, meet with the client. I said, do you have any clue of what the nature of the allegation is? Yeah, I do. I think I know what it is. Okay, good. Let's talk about it. And so we talk about what we think the allegation is. And then the next question becomes is, well, Joe, do we go talk to DHR or do we not? That is an independent decision between you and I related to the case and the nature of the allegations. And my client doesn't understand, so they ask me questions like, well, do we get to ask who made the report? Do we get to ask what's in the allegations? Do we get to ask what's in the statement? No, you don't get to ask anything because they're going to say it's an open investigation. They're asking you the questions. They're not providing information. Same thing like when you go down and talk to the police or a prosecutor or FBI, Secret Service, ATF, DEA. They're asking the questions. They're not giving information up. They're there to find out. They're being an investigator. But I felt like in this situation, I said, if there's nothing else that you haven't told me, let's go down and have an initial conversation and get a feel of where we're going with this case. And sure enough, about 5 minutes into the conversation and the questioning, we could tell who had made the report. We knew exactly who made the report. We were headed for a divorce case. They were trying to get the upper hand in a divorce case by starting an allegation in a DHR investigation. And so we answered the questions as best we felt like we could, and we reached a point that I felt like it was not in my client's best interest to say anything else. Was it to their beneficial to do it? So we said, this is all for today. We're going to call it a day. And we left. And then we moved forward with the divorce case. If you find yourself facing a charge of child abuse or neglect with DHR, and a caseworker shows up at your home or your door, it is your choice whether or not you make a statement or let them in. So always consider whether you want to talk to a lawyer or not before you talk to DHR. And those are independent decisions, and those are on a case-by-case basis, and those are not blanket decisions that can be made for any situation. Couple things to talk about. There were a couple other stories I saw this last week that I thought were very relevant to Birmingham. There was a study done on passive-aggressive drivers. I love this story, the title, because if you live in Alabama and you drive on Highway 280, you're going to really appreciate this story. Okay. Alabama Highway has some of the nation's most passive-aggressive drivers. Yeah, it's Alabama, baby. It's hot, and we drive like race car drivers. There was a study done, and they said people that live in Birmingham, Huntsville, and Mobile, and with the number of lanes we have on the interstate, have some of the most aggressive drivers in the country. And it goes on to talk about the roads. We all know what the roads are here in Alabama. Some are better than others, depending on where you are. And the Alabama symbol should be a construction orange pylon on the side of the interstate. How long have we been looking at orange pylons on the side of the road in Alabama? My whole life. They talk about drivers refusing to merge, meaning let people in your lane, close the gap when you signal, block intersections, and mosey into the passing lane. Made the list. They talk about us as drivers being impatient or territorial driving, but we contribute to tension, anxiety, and emotional fatigue of everyday life. They reference Birmingham and Highway 280, which we've needed a flyover for 20 years, and I don't know why we just don't do it. If you live at 280, I'm sorry. We just need a flyover. As known for its shopping center traffic and frequent construction, took the 4th spot, number 4, for most passive-aggressive drivers in the nation. That is phenomenal. Out of a country of 50 states and 350 million people, Birmingham took the 4th spot as the most passive-aggressive in the nation for drivers. That's unbelievable. University Drive, Highway 72 up in Huntsville, where there are commuters, students, shoppers, visitors, local traffic, was named the 40th most passive-aggressive road in the United States. Number 40 in the country. Whoa. Down in Mobile, at number 45, Airport Boulevard was number 45 on the list due to mall traffic, restaurant entrances, turn lanes, and cross-town traffic. And so here's the list of the most passive-aggressive driver roads in the state of Alabama. Ventura Boulevard in L.A. was number 1. Number 2 was US 1 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 3 was up in Yonkers, New York. 4 was Highway 280 in Mountain Brook. Get out of there. 5 was Route 17 in New Jersey. 6 was Lancaster Avenue in Philadelphia. 7 was Rockville Pike in Montgomery County, Maryland. 8 was North Avenue in Chicago. 9 was Route 1, Boston Post Road up in Connecticut. And number 10 was Westheimer Road in Houston. You're telling me one road in Houston made the top 10 list and Highway 280 is number 4 in the country for the most passive-aggressive drivers? That's pretty impressive. Well, oh, and by the way, I think it's this weekend or next weekend again over there on 280 by, what's it called, Pump House Road, where they're putting the bridges and the girders up. I think they're going to close the roads down again for the weekend just to make you feel better about that. Maybe one day they'll finish that. So, people of Alabama, we're passive-aggressive drivers. I love this story. If you'll remember from the primaries and all of the candidates we had, we've been talking a lot about AI data centers. This story came out this week, and I found this really fascinating because Columbiana down in Shelby County had a municipal meeting, and they said they were going to put hard parameters on AI data centers. Well, guess what? They just cut a deal. They signed a $1 billion deal with an AI company out of California for a data center. $1.1 billion. The company is called DigiPowerX Inc. They are a publicly traded data center company in Miami, and they have bought a data center to put in Columbiana, Shelby County, Alabama. I was a little shocked to hear this, as much information as we talked about data centers during the election, specifically about Columbiana, because I know I saw a report 2 months ago that said that they were not going to just let people come in and put them up. They use a lot of power. They take a lot of Waterworks Board, are you listening? And they take land for a data center. Those 3 things they take. Oh, and by the way, they do not employ lots of people. You don't have to have a lot of folks for a data center. It runs on itself. So there you go. That's an interesting story. So that's the show for the week. We got about a minute left. Final word, about to wrap up for my runners and for me, because I haven't been taking my own advice. 12 running lessons that a friend gave me this last weekend that I needed to hear. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. Running, whatever it takes, but it will take everything that you've got. Be humble when you are victorious. You are stronger than you think. The pain is temporary. You reign how you train. Didn't know what that meant. Believe in yourself. Celebrate the wins, but learn from your losses. Nothing worthwhile comes easy. You can't win all the time. Being disciplined pays off. Set your own pace and finish strong. And those words apply to life as to anything else in society. Folks, have a great week. We'll see you next week. Gotta go. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Don't forget to follow Joe's Legal Lowdown podcast on iHeart. If you need a private legal consultation, reach out to Joe on his website, joeingramlaw.com. Tune in again next Saturday for the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by any other lawyer.